Good morning. It is a joy to be here at Delco today. I don't know if you were here last time I was here, but I thoroughly enjoy every time that I'm a part of this community, and I've just enjoyed being here. Have close ties with Jordan and Hope when they were serving at Hope Church with us, and we just enjoy and love being a part of what's happening through you and what's how this body continues to grow and become more and more like Jesus. It's always an encouragement. So it was a little bit ironic when Jordan asked me to speak on this particular passage, and I'm going to tell you why. So at that time when we had this conversation, I was getting a message from the Lord over and over again. Like I heard it in one place and then I'd hear it in another. And so it was this message of seek his face, not his hands. The first time I heard it was in a prayer group I was in, and one of the members of this prayer group shared that she had heard this and it really touched her heart. Seek his face, not his hands. And that night, I think it was that very night, I went home and I was reading through a book that I felt God had put on my heart to read, and it was this one. It's called Spiritual Authority by Dr. Rob Reimer. And I open up this book and I read that evening, and what is the title of the section I'm reading? But seek his face, not his hands. And I was so shocked. I'm like, Lord is trying to get my attention, and he did get my attention on that. And this is how Dr. Rob Reimer puts it. He said, when I got the lesson that day, I realized I needed to make the pursuit of the presence of God my number one priority. Not ministry, not fruit, not power, not help, not wisdom, not answers to prayer, not his hands, his face. And so I began, this was in the springtime, I began kind of searching and going on this journey of like, God, why are you putting this message in front of me all the time? What are you trying to say to me? What is the significance of this? So I started like searching it out in my heart. And I began thinking about, well, what is the significance of someone's face? And words are a primary form of communication, right? We speak what we want, but oftentimes, I think our face communicates just as much, maybe sometimes more. And so I started thinking about that, thinking about how communication face-to-face happens, reading expressions and this, correspondence that we have with other people. Just positive and negative. I mean, I thought about our kids or any kids. When you've done something wrong and you don't really want to fess up, you have a hard time making eye contact with that person. Or maybe even if you have a strained relationship with someone, it's hard to look them in the face, isn't it? There's something hindering deep down inside, right? I also was thinking about it in the positive, though. Think about when you've been to a wedding and a bride and groom are beholding each other. There's just a look that passes, that it exchanges between them that speaks maybe more than words, right? Something happens, something's being communicated between both of them. We all admire it and we see it happening, but the face is really a huge communicator. And so I began thinking about all of this. I'm like, okay, I understand how the face can be such a major point of communication, but God, you're talking about seeking your face. What about the face of God? And so the more I thought about it, I'm like, well, we sing all kinds of songs about this, don't we? A lot of our songs say, oh, God of Jacob, God, let's be a generation that seeks your face, and I think about that other one. It's like, oh, your face is all I seek. And it's like, do we mean what we're saying? Or what are we saying when we sing that song? As I pondered, I realized how much of the Old Testament is saturated in seeking God's face. And the Psalms, you will find the theme throughout the entire Old Testament and the New Testament. But in particular, these songs and of the Psalms, they're You're going to see it everywhere. Seeking the face of God. So I thought, to start us off this morning, I'm going to read you a little journal entry that I wrote that was me processing what it meant to seek the face of God and trying to understand what this really meant. And so I started off by writing Psalm 11:7. It says, "For the Lord is righteous, he loves righteousness. The upright will behold his face." Jesus, this has been a common theme this season, seeking the face of God. Not seeking what you can do for me or even in me, but to seek your face in intimacy and relationship. What does it mean to seek your face? I think it is a journey of discovery, maybe even in a more personal way. Even right now, as I'm reading your word, I think, what is your expression toward me? What is the look in your eyes? I cannot see you physically, but you are the great healer who can restore spiritual sight to my spiritual blindness. How should I make out the features on your face? How should I read your expression toward me and the offering of my life? Are you pleased with me? I know the truths of the Bible, but what I'm seeking is deeper, the reality of those truths toward me. The word says your face shines on us. Does it shine on me? Do I exhibit the radiance of you? Do your eyes hold laughter at some of my questions? Do they look at me with adoration? Do they express hurt or sorrow? Do you smile? Are you angry? Are you sad? How and what does it mean to seek your face? I think to seek your face is to know you, an intimate relationship, true friendship, a father-daughter relationship. I want to hear your voice, but also to see your face and behold your holy love. It will transform who I am. I'll be changed as Moses' appearance changed, but with a permanence. How is it done? Silence, solitude, presence, listening, contemplating you. So the goal, why am I reading all this to you and sharing this with you? It is because I feel, after spending some time with the Lord, the significance of this message that God has been putting in my life over the past few months and how it has corresponded to where we are in John chapter 9 is astounding to me. And I believe that the Lord has this message for us this morning, right now, together to seek the face of Jesus. Because we're going to read this morning how the man who was born blind beholds the face of Jesus for the very first time. And so my goal this morning is for all of us together alongside of this man who was born blind. I'm going to call him the healed man, I think. I'm going to try to. Calling him the man who was born blind over and over again is such a mouthful as I was practicing this. I tried to come up with a name for him, but then it just sounded cheesy, so I just decided to go with the healed man. But my goal is that alongside of the healed man, that we would experience seeing the face of Jesus this morning. That is the goal. And the goal is also, in other words, that you would hear that call to seek his face this morning. And we'll kind of expound on what that means. But join in that journey of seeking his face with me. I'm going to pray. Holy Spirit, I can't help but be amazed at how you have aligned all these things in life. That this morning I'm here, you've been speaking this message to me and trying to teach me about it, and that it so aligns with what you did in the life of this man. I pray that you would help us to see you more clearly, Jesus. See the call of what an intimate relationship, a face-to-face relationship with you looks like. And I pray that you would open us up to your word and to your spirit this morning. Amen. Okay, I'm going to try to keep up with this slides, but I'm not always remembered to do that. I wanted to briefly just talk about the journey through John that you all have been to up until this point, right? Throughout this book of John, Jesus has been redefining everything, right? He's had all these conversations with a variety of people, where he completely undoes the way they've been thinking about things. He redefines it all. And I'm thinking of Nicodemus. You know, he redefined what it meant to be born, right? The woman at the well, like, what is water? And he redefines what water is and spiritual refreshment. The feeding of the 5,000 with the disciples, what is food? And so we see this inbreaking kingdom of heaven happening, right? It's heavenly. And so it has to be taught with those spiritual principles, and then we have to learn it in a new way. And so he's redefining everything. And so we see in this particular chapter that Jesus is redefining what it means to see, and that there's a spiritual reality to seeing. And so we have to learn that. I think one of the other really imperative backdrops to this story, I think Brad, you talked about it a couple weeks ago, but Jesus had just revealed he is the light of the world. We see that at the beginning of John 2, but he announced it to people. And so that is a very important backdrop to where we're at this morning. And so basic story review is Jesus was questioned by his disciples. Who sinned? This man or his parents that he was born blind? That was right at the beginning of 9. And Jesus said, neither. You're actually completely off. And so the glory of God might be shown through this man's life. Jesus puts the mud on his eyes and he tells him to go wash it off in the pool of Siloam. I don't know how you say it. And that's the last we see of Jesus in this particular chapter until today's passage. And the man goes, he washes off the mud, he comes back seeing, and it causes all kinds of trouble with the Pharisees. You guys have heard the messages over the past couple weeks. They were very upset that Jesus did this on the Sabbath, and there was all kinds of arguments about what actually happened. You're lying, and it results in this man, this healed man, being cast out of the synagogue, basically excommunicated with the religious world of his time. And that brings us to where we are this morning, John 9:35 through 41. I'm going to put it up there for you. Look at that. So we're going to read this together from the NIV. And it says, Jesus heard that they had thrown him out. And when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he, sir? The man asked. Tell me so that I may believe in him. Jesus said, you have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. Then the man said, Lord, I believe, and worshipped him. Jesus said, for judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind. Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, what? Are we blind too? Jesus said, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. So there are two encounters with Jesus here, two ways that Jesus is being seen. And we're talking about seeing the face of Jesus this morning. And so two encounters, it was the healed man, it was the Pharisees, and they had very different results. The healed man ultimately arrives at the relational position of seeing the face of Jesus. He has a faith response, believes in Jesus, and that is where he lands, is seeing the face of Jesus. The second are the Pharisees, and they are left in utter blindness. I want to start backwards and work from the end of this passage to the beginning, because I want to talk about the Pharisees first. So we're going to talk about the encounter that Jesus has with the Pharisees this morning. And the question that is in the back of our minds is what kept them from being able to see Jesus for who he was. I mean, he was their Messiah. He was the one they were waiting for, but they missed it. They didn't see it. Why? What was the reason? And so they were unable to see the face of God that we were talking about, unable to see who he was. And it wasn't for a lack of invitation, because right at the beginning, Jesus says, "For judgment I have come into the world so that the blind will see and that those who see will become blind." It's an open invitation. This is a global invitation, actually. I've come into the world to give spiritual sight to the blind. It seems to have a requirement, though, to be able to see. You must be blind. And this was exactly what the Pharisees were unable to arrive at. They were unable to say they were blind, right? They were unable to see their need. And I think what we can gather here, the way they approached Jesus, their heart posture came from a place of pride. And that blinded them, and they were unable to see the face of Jesus. They were unable to see him for who he was. But think about what they were rich in. They're rich in respect. This is the highest in the religious system. Like, the Pharisees were up there. Rich in respect, rich in reputation, rich in education. They were rich in theology and rich in honor, right? But yet, rich in all those things, they put confidence in that, and that heart posture of pride kept them from being able to see Jesus and to receive him as the light of the world. And we see them remaining in darkness about who Jesus is. You know, the truth is, we don't like being told we're wrong, right? I don't think anybody really likes that, if we're honest. No one likes being told we're wrong, especially when other people are watching. So I think we're seeing a bit of that. But I want to back up a little bit to a conversation Jesus had with Nicodemus back in chapter 3. And he talked about this very thing with Nicodemus, who was a Pharisee. And he said, "This is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men loved the darkness rather than the light, for their deeds were evil. For everyone who does evil hates the light and does not come to the light for fear that his deeds will be exposed." Jesus was exposing the pride of their heart. The light that he was bearing was exposing that, and they hated it. And they were unable to reconcile with that. I think one of the best illustrations I can come up with, this is my family over here, my husband, my kids. I think it was a few summers ago, we went to Mammoth Cave. Has anybody been there? Yeah? Okay, we did the tour where they took us to the biggest one, and then they take you to a bat cavern, and they shut the lights off. Do you guys remember this? The darkness is impenetrable. You can put your face in front of your hand in front of your face, and you cannot see it. It is so dark when you are back in that cavern and they shut the lights off, just as a demonstration. It was unbelievable. But here's the thing, I am not blind. My eyes function okay. I'm pretty nearsighted, but I'm not blind. But it didn't matter that my eyes worked, because the darkness was so dark, I couldn't see a thing. And so this is the kind of spiritual light we're talking about. The Pharisees were wrapped in this darkness that consumed them. It consumed the way they saw Jesus, and it actually penetrated even more, even deeper. They were unable to see themselves in the right light, and they were unable to see other people in the right light as well. This darkness and this view, this blindness, was all consuming. They saw Jesus as a sinner. They said he was a sinner earlier in this chapter. Elsewhere in the Gospels, they think he's demonic. In fact, just the very fact that they cast out this healed man, excommunicated him because of his association with Jesus, really kind of showed what they thought of him, what they saw in him, and it was darkness. They were completely darkened by how they saw. They saw themselves as self-righteous, and they were completely off in that. And they saw others in a critical, judgmental way. And we know this because of the way they were treating this man who was healed. They told him he was utterly born in sin, and that's why he was the way he was. So this darkness, the spiritual blindness, blinds the way we see God, blinds the way we see ourselves, and the way we see other people. Pride is one of the biggest obstructions in our ability to have this intimate relationship with him, this face-to-face kind of relationship and intimacy. Pride will blind us every time. It will obstruct those moments that we spend with him, and it will completely inhibit our view of the face of Jesus. Well, let's move on to the other encounter. Let's talk about the encounter with the healed man. And so we're going to read those first couple verses one more time. And we're going to look at what his heart posture was as Jesus approached him. So one more time, in verse 35, Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" "Who is he, sir?" Some translations will say Lord instead of sir, but we know that the healed man was honoring Jesus in the way he was conversing with him. He had high respect for him. And we know from earlier in the chapter that Jesus, at minimum, regarded him as a prophet. So he recognizes Jesus' voice. He knows he's talking to Jesus, the man who had healed him, but still probably thinks he's a prophet at this point in time. "Who is he, sir?" the man asked. "Tell me so that I may believe in him." He knew that whatever Jesus said was going to be believable because he regarded this man, at least at minimum, as a prophet. So whoever he said the Messiah was, he was going to believe that answer. Jesus said, "You have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you." Then the man said, "Lord, I believe." We have a faith confession here, faith, a step of faith. And he stepped into the light of Jesus. "Lord, I believe." And he worshiped him. I love how John just has these bare bones, of what happened, but there's so much in here. There's so much to see. The heart posture that the healed man had was humility. And we see that throughout the story, that he came to Jesus in a posture of humility. Opposite from the Pharisees, he actually was poor in everything the Pharisees were rich in. So he was poor in respect, poor in reputation, poor in education. I love how last week Jordan mentioned how he was poor in theology. He didn't have it all right. He was just being honest with what happened. It's like, whether he was a prophet or not, I don't know, but I was blind and now I see. Poor in honor. I don't think anybody really respected him. And this is what's interesting. He was able to see the face of Jesus, see Jesus for who he was, because he had nothing obstructing his view. He had nothing. There was room for Jesus to enter into his life. And so we are seeing that this posture of humility leads to relationship. And this posture of humility enabled him to see Jesus and ultimately his face. And I wanted to share this quote with you from Oswald Chambers in My Utmost for His Highest. And it says, "The bedrock in Jesus Christ's kingdom is poverty, not possession. Not decisions for Jesus Christ, but a sense of absolute futility. I cannot begin to do it. Then Jesus says, 'Blessed are you.' That is the entrance, and it does take us a long time to believe we are poor. The knowledge of our own poverty brings us to the moral frontier where Jesus Christ works." So now I'm going to dip back to where I began. Remember how I began? I said I felt like what God had been teaching me over the past few months coincided really well with this story that we're reading about today. We're going to dip back into the idea of seeking God's face, not his hands, because we're going to, for a moment, we're going to watch the unveiling of Jesus before this healed man's very eyes. Something beautiful that takes a little bit of imagination to enter in is that This man, at this point in time, realized that Jesus was the one who sought and found him. And when we think about seeking God's face, not his hands, Jesus didn't heal this man just to heal him, but he healed him and then he went after him when he heard he had been cast out, right? This is a very important piece, that Jesus goes and he finds this man. I think it's mind-boggling to think that in this hour of this day, the Son of God, his mission was for that moment to go and find the man that had been cast out, that nobody cared about. That was his job for that moment of time. That is a beautiful thought. And I think the healed man at that moment realized that he had been sought after by Jesus. He was sought after because the goal is relationship with Jesus. It wasn't just about the healing, but about relationship. And so during their conversation, Jesus reveals himself to this healed man, right? He calls himself the Son of Man and says, I am the one. I am he. He's the one speaking with you. So he reveals himself not only as healer, but as Messiah. So not only did Jesus heal this man, decided to go and find him, but the one that went after him and found him revealed that he is the Messiah to him. I mean, all these things are simultaneously being unveiled and revealed to this healed man at the same time. And so the fact that the Messiah took time to go find him and reveal himself as Messiah to him was revelatory. This was something beautiful. And so just go with me a little bit with your sanctified imagination. So just think about, I'm guessing, I don't know what the time frame is in this story. It seems like not very long, like maybe a day, I don't know. But for one day, for the first time in this man's life, he saw human faces. He had lived in darkness until Jesus healed him. He had never seen a human face until this day. And what were the first faces he saw? I'm not sure, but I'm thinking some of the first were mom and dad, right? And we heard how mom and dad probably received him with great joy initially that he could see, but we see that the story got complicated. They were afraid. They were afraid of what would happen being associated with Jesus and this healing that took place on the Sabbath. So as he beheld the faces of his mom and dad, they were clouded with fear, anxiety, and worry. First human faces he might have seen. After that, we know that he saw the faces of the Pharisees. What did he see in those faces? I mean, accusation, bitterness, anger, rage, all kinds of things that he was, judgment. I mean, all kinds of like really hard things being introduced into the communication of a facial expression. He is seeing judgment and anger. This is his experience of humanity. This is his experience of what the human face looks like until this moment. Until this moment where he realizes he is looking in the face of Jesus. And John doesn't describe it because I don't think you can. In the same way you can't describe what is being passed between that bride and that groom, or that father and his new baby, or that mom and her new baby, those communications that are flowing between them. But for the first time, this healed man saw the radiance of the face of Jesus, which was the face of God. For the first time, he saw love, he saw mercy, he saw grace, acceptance, compassion, and joy. Instead of judgment, it was mercy. Instead of anger, he saw love. Instead of accusation, forgiveness. Instead of fear and pride, he saw compassion. He may have had his physical eyes healed before this moment, but this is the moment when he truly began to see, when he saw Jesus for who he was. Seeing means seeing Jesus for who he is. And this is what it means to see. And the expression that he saw emanating from the face of Jesus caused a response. And that response was worship. It says, and he worshiped him. I don't know what that scene looked like, but I don't think he cared what it looked like. What he saw shining from the face of Jesus was transformational. And here's the thing. As wonderful as it is for you and I to sit here and talk about what a beautiful moment this was, God invites you into the same thing to experience for yourself. And to reflect on the fact that Jesus has something better for you and me than even just to think about how beautiful this moment is, that he wants to invite us into that kind of deep relationship where we are stepping into the light of Jesus, stepping into the face of God, allowing this expression to shine on us. So something that I always was frustrated about as like a teen or young adult was people always talked about spiritual things. Like, well, you need to walk in the Spirit. It's like, great, what does that actually mean? Practicality. I don't want to do that to you this morning. Like, what does it mean to see Jesus' face? Well, what it means is kind of similar to what Dr. Rob Reimer wrote about in his book. It's coming from that heart posture of humility before the Lord and wanting to actually know him. Stepping into a relationship of making time to be in the presence of Jesus just for the sake of being in his presence. Just for the sake of getting to know him for who he is. Grace and mercy and joy, they're only found in one place. You can only know those things from being with him. And so having a daily time of worship, a daily pattern where you are experiencing Jesus in this relational way. Not that I think he loves that we get to pray to him and ask him for things. When I reflect on my own life sometimes, I'm like, I am just coming to him asking him for a bunch of stuff all the time. Bless this, bless that, give me favor for this, help my kids to have this and have that. And that's not really the type of relationship that Jesus was after. That's seeking his hands, right? But we see in this story, just by the fact that Jesus returns to this man and shows him his face, demonstrates to us that he is after so much more than that. He just loves you for who you are. He just loves you. It's not always easy to explain, but it's the truth. So Jesus changes, and as we spend that time with him, as we are exposed to the radiance of his face and his light, he will change the way we see ourselves, the way we see God and others. And we'll see ourselves as less and less like those Pharisees who were judgmental, critical, thought very highly of themselves, and couldn't see the face of God. We will be transformed in seeing other people in a less critical way, in the way that God sees them. We'll be seeing ourselves correctly, just as objects of God's affection. And then we'll see Jesus for who he is. And so all that he has done for you and me is to lead us to this place of relationship, of deep relationship. And so this next point I have here, the best glasses, like eyeglasses. The best eyeglasses are the love, mercy, grace, and forgiveness emanating from the face of Jesus and illuminating our vision. That's the way we need to see the world. That's the way we need to see our neighbors, our coworkers, our children, our spouses, is through this light from the face of Jesus, illuminating everything in front of us. But we can only gain that when we spend time in his presence, getting to know him in relationship. And this was another word that the Lord gave me over the past few months I thought I would share with you. In the same way that we aim to seek his face and not his hands, he also doesn't do that same thing to us. He doesn't pursue you, seek and find you for what you can do for him. We're not objects. He just loves you. We have the honor of serving him. We have great joy in serving and doing for the kingdom of God. But he doesn't seek you for what you can do for him, which is an amazing thing. And so I wanted to end back where I started a little bit. In June, we went to the beach as we normally do. And I love going to the beach because I will spend our whole vacation just kind of going through like a short book usually. I had all those questions in my journal that I read to you earlier that were just kind of weighing on me, that I was pondering about. You know, what does it mean to seek the face of God? God, what is your expression toward me? Like in a personal way. So I read through the book of Zephaniah, and at the very end, it has this beautiful passage that reflects God's expression toward his people. And this was written to Judah, who was extremely rebellious and full of pride. Pride is a major theme. And so he expresses this to the remnant of Judah. He says, "The Lord your God is in your midst." God is with you. "A mighty one who will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you by his love. He will exult over you with loud singing." Isn't that amazing to really, in a personal way, think that God sings over your life? That this is who God is. This is who he is, and he rejoices over you. It may not make sense, but this is the reality of Jesus and his heart toward his people. So, one thing I really appreciate about your church is that you guys, you don't want to just hear a word and then leave and forget about it, but you build time to actually reflect on what you've heard. And you are disciplined to be intentional about pondering and thinking about these things. So I did come up with a few questions for you to think about. There's no flow to these questions, I'll be honest. There's just a variety of questions that you can think about, but God sends forth his word to do a work in our hearts, and I love that you guys will take time every week to reflect on what you've heard. And so these are the questions for reflection. Consider your relationship with Jesus. Are you striving for things God can do for you more than seeking his face and relationship? How have you experienced seeing the face of Jesus? Do you know his grace toward you, mercy, forgiveness? Consider areas of pride in your life that might be blocking your intimacy with Jesus. Does it manifest in the way you think about yourself, the way you view others, or the way you see God? And lastly, what is one thing that you sense God speaking to you today? And how can it change the way you live and walk with Jesus this week? Go ahead and take some time thinking about these things. Journal, pray, whatever route works best for you.